Lizzie Best, congratulations on your first performance of Disgraceful.
Thank you.
This is the first time you've performed this show in full, and it's the first time you've performed solo. Is that the case?
It's my first full-length solo show, so before that I have done I think the longest I've done was about 35 minutes. And other than that, yeah, probably the longest sets have been about 20 minutes, headlining something. And it was my first solo show, and it's my first show that's really a cabaret show. So I sing, and I don't know if we could quite call it dancing. I just jump around a bit.
Well, Lucy Best, how did it go? You had about 30 people in there. How did you feel it went?
I am, as you heard, my own harshest critic. So what I feel from the feedback people have given me as they've left and congratulated me and said well done and that they enjoyed it, that it went well. Having to battle with my inner going, but what about that bit and what about that bit and what about that bit? No, but I think it did go well, and thank you so much for congratulating me, because that was knowing that I had a reviewer in on the opening night was also quite anxiety inducing, because opening night is bound to have a couple of hiccups, but we had one hiccup and I think I got away with it.
And you suffer from anxiety.
And I suffer from anxiety.
You suffer from anxiety, and you like to perform on stage. Are you insane?
Apparently.
What is it about performing that redresses or addresses your anxiety issue? Why does someone who suffers from anxiety choose to put themselves up on a crucifix in front of a live audience on a regular basis?
That is a really good question, and it's also interesting because I know so many performers who also have anxiety. I think that it's because you can control, to an extent, you can control the way you present yourself. And there's also that, safety net of, well, if you don't like me, that was me on stage, that wasn't me in my kitchen, or that, it's this is a version of me, this is one part of me, this isn't all of me, this is a part of me that I am choosing to show and share.
You mentioned a couple of snafus. You're talking about the AV. There was a small disconnect with the AV.
Yeah.
But having said that, I spoke to your tech guy, Tex the Tech, here at the Butterfly Club, who told me that all the cueing of the images and the audio, that's all you choosing to do it, choosing to direct that part of the show.
Yeah.
Now, Lucy Best, we have seen many times during quite a few festivals now, AV stuffing up a show or, introducing technical hiccups. You had one. Can you just tell me how important it is to have AV assist in a show like this, and how hard you worked on it to make it all work?
Originally this show was not going to have so much AV, and I decided to do that because the Butterfly Club installed a screen, and I was like, there's a screen. I'm going to make the most of that. And my mum moved house and gave me a bunch of old photos, and I was like, these are funny, these are gold, these have to go in. So I kind of built that element around the fact that it was available to me, and I decided to control it myself because that helps reduce my anxiety. Because if anything goes wrong, it's my fault, and I don't have to worry about someone else.
Now, you make a point about how old you are, 48 years old, and you are recounting your life as a disgraceful young girl, teenager, young woman, young mother, divorced person, and then going into your 40s. You've got children, but you are continuing to have a lot of sex and take drugs.
Yes.
You're telling this story at 48. Is there something significant in the time that you've taken, the age that you've chosen to tell this story? Could you have told this story at 38?
No, because at 38 I wasn't yet confident enough to tell the story. At 38 I was still struggling with the trying on costumes and accents and feeling like the way I judged myself might be the way other people judged me. But now I've realised it's me that judges myself like that. And so now I can share that story, and I also now understand that most people do that. Most of us are our own harshest judge. And so that's why I feel like it's important to say, hey, I've done all this stuff, and some of it's pretty bad, but you're okay, I'm okay. We can all do things that are considered naughty, but still be good people.
Yeah. I want to know why tell the story. Why tell the story of your disgraceful behaviour across your life?
Yeah, I think part of it is because, well, not part of it. Because I've realised I shouldn't feel ashamed. I shouldn't feel ashamed or embarrassed. And that's part of getting to this age and going, clearly I'm not going to change. So who am I? This is part of who I am. And I don't need to feel embarrassed or ashamed. And if someone feels embarrassed by me, then that's their stuff. And they can go, I love my mum dearly, but she hates tattoos, and I have lots of tattoos, and she didn't like me wearing tutus to the supermarket. But nonetheless, she's told me she's proud of me.
If a male comedian, 48 years old, was on stage talking about all the drugs and sex he'd had, would he be dealing with the issue of shame?
That's a really great question, Jim, and probably not. And I only really touch on that very briefly in the show. But yes, there's certainly when I was in my, as you heard, my late teens, my early 20s, when I was kind of proudly promiscuous. I thought that was a feminist thing to do. Madonna was out there doing it, and I was like, well, it's good enough for her, it's good enough for me. And she has been shamed. I think that the notches on the belt thing, there's some kind of a triumph that men, I hope that society is changing, but back then, back in the 90s, when I was talking about, men got to be proud of how they got away with things and didn't die, or how they, had sex with that woman and then didn't see her again. Whereas, for a woman to do it, and a young woman, it was quite unheard of.
Well, in your experience, have things changed enough?
No, we have a long way to go. As I said, I have young people. I've had 2 children, so they're teenagers now. And I feel like they are living in a much better world than I lived in, but we still have a long way to go.
I'm going to get historical on you just for a moment, but this is just something that continually baffles me. The distinction between moral character and sexual behaviour. And there's meant to be a link. But as far back as Mae West, demonstrating in her films that enjoying sex, a woman can enjoy sex and still have a sterling moral character. She made films with this theme, and that was back in the early 1930s. How do we find ourselves in the 21st century?
90 years later.
90 years later, and that bizarre, stupid link is still there.
Yeah. And thank you for pointing that out, because that is one of the reasons that I talk about the things I do on stage. And my show Unbridled, so I mentioned there was a show about divorce. It's a 3-hander. We wrote that show about the joy of life post-divorce, and the unraveling, and what I call a post-mortem on a long-term relationship that needs to be done so that you can make sense of what happened. And then we all kind of went, grew our wings, and off we flew. And one of the reviews said it was pure feminist magic, and none of us said, let's write a feminist show. It was just that it was feminist because women were on stage saying these things openly, honestly, and hopefully inspiringly, because women coming out of a marriage and getting divorced and having less super, all those things are issues because of how disadvantaged we have found ourselves.
Lucy Best, are you leaving any important bits out of this show to do with addiction or with catching diseases or anything like that?
So I'm lucky enough not to have an addictive personality, and when I first wrote that bit at the end where I say take all the very non-highly addictive drugs, originally I wrote that joke as take all the drugs, and I was like, oh no, because right now we have ice to contend with, and that's a huge problem. Just on my train on the way here, there was a guy who was clearly wired, aggressive, thought something was going on that none of the rest of us could see. my guess is he was on ice. Thankfully, I've never struggled with addiction. You know, I mentioned I smoked as a teen. You know, I gave up smoking. I don't have trouble with alcohol. I've been okay with drugs. You know, I've had habits, but I certainly have been lucky enough not to have an addiction. But I know that that's an issue for a lot of people, and I do believe that the addiction is the issue, not the drug.
Who are the queer police?
The guy in the Village People who dresses up as a cop.
That's not the answer that we need. Lucy Best, who are the queer police who you reference in the show, and you got a very knowing ripple of giggles throughout your audience?
No, I think it was just the fact that some police are queer.
You're not making reference to an orthodoxy in the queer community?
No one in particular.
Okay.
There was a big scandal at Pride March, I think it was 2 years ago, because the police wanted to have a presence. And the whole reason Pride March came about was because queer people, you know, back then it was the gays and the lesbians, but, you know, have been oppressed and arrested and beaten by police. And so even within the police force, there's obviously some homophobia. And so their presence at Pride March was viewed as very problematic. But really, there are people who are police officers and are probably very good people who are also gay. Not that those things are necessarily the same, but, you know, and they should be allowed to march. So I suppose on one level, I was referencing that. But I was just referencing the whole way that things get pigeonholed. If you're this, then you can't be that. And if you're this, you can't be that. Like, obviously, there are queer police.
Just for the record, are you okay with queer police marching in a pride parade?
Yes, I am, but I think it has to be sensitively done. And I also, when I look at, and this isn't necessarily on them, this is how Pride March is ordered, but you're like, these groups go together, and I know that the way the police have been positioned, and, you know, it's challenging for a lot of people.
And again, just to clarify, when you mention queer police, you are not mentioning any sort of orthodoxy within the queer community that dictates if you are identifying as queer, you must automatically subscribe to these sets of beliefs and opinions. You're not mentioning that.
I'm not mentioning that, but that gay and lesbian thing that I do talk about in the show, I experienced that a lot. I've experienced that a lot as a young adult. And my first Pride March I went to when I was 19, and I went with a bunch of friends who were lesbians, and they gave me permission to come even though I wasn't a proper lesbian. And they were my friends, and I didn't challenge it at the time because I was like, oh, thank you. Thank you for letting me come. Now I go, I have a group that I can march with.
You seem in the show to be quite happy and quite upbeat about your experiences. Not a lot of oppression for being bisexual or discrimination mentioned in the show. Again, is this stuff that you're leaving out, or have you had quite a happy ride so far?
There's stuff I'm leaving out.
Okay.
I want the show to be fun.
Okay.
I want the show to be a celebration of coming to understand yourself and be proud of yourself. I don't want to dwell on the difficult bits, but of course there were difficult bits.
You actually have quite a respectable day job.
I do.
Do you not?
I do.
Can you just tell me what you do for a day job? And is there any issue between your day job and what you do on the side here, live on stage?
So I've worked in like community engagement and communications in the not-for-profit sector for about 11 years, and I worked in community engagement in theatre and in producing theatre back in the UK before I left there. And here in Melbourne, I used to keep my performance separate from my day job. So I used to work in sustainability, and the way I would explain my job was I explained technical things in ways that normal people would understand, and now I explain legal things in the way normal people will understand. But I realised a few years ago that the through line is I want to communicate, I want people to connect on a human level, and I want people to understand things that they don't understand, and I want to connect. So this legal thing, and you have this problem. I'm going to help you both. You have this, you have a house that's drafty and cold, and your bills are really high, and I know an engineer who can help you. So I stopped separating. I stopped pretending that they were two different bits of me, and now I am Lucy, and I'm here to communicate with people and to help people relate to other people as humans.
So what is your day job? Do you have a title?
My day job is I'm a community education officer at a community legal centre.
It is 3 degrees out there. It is a crappy night. It's raining, it's cold, it's miserable. You had, I think, a bit more than 30 people in there tonight on a preview night. Who are these people? Were you expecting such a strong crowd and such a strong reaction to your show?
I'm so pleased you said such a strong reaction, because while I was on stage I just kept going, are they even liking it? Is anyone... The little amygdala part of my brain was going, there's a problem, they don't like it, no one's listening. Someone moved, someone picked up their bag and crossed their legs the other way, and I thought they were leaving, and I kind of have this moment of going, oh, they're leaving, I've offended them, what have I done?
But are these Lucy best people, or...
Some of them.
Okay, so this is like people that you know, friends. I just want to make absolutely clear whether these are normal, regular, ticket-buying members of the public, or are these a bunch of
it was probably about 50% people I know.
So what's your plans with the show? You've got about a week here?
Yeah.
And then what do you hope to do with it?
Adelaide Fringe.
Okay.
Early next year. Probably Melbourne Comedy Festival next year. Edinburgh, but possibly not next year because of my teenagers. So next year my eldest will be doing year 12. So maybe Adelaide the following year, which will be my 50th year. So world tour for my 50th.
And are you already booked for Adelaide Fringe?
I've booked my accommodation, but I haven't found my venue. That's the start.
So you guys are going to sleep and eat, but not nowhere to perform yet.
Well, I mean, I feel like once this show run has gone and I hopefully get some good reviews, then I'll have something to leverage off.
I'm just keen to know, your kids are now teenagers and they presumably know all about does that make you like the coolest mum that you can have? I mean, how do they react to having a mother who's had this adventurous, colourful social life?
I think you'd have to ask them. I think...
I'm asking you. You're the mother. You know you must know how they regard you, or what they think about you, what your conversations are like. That's what I want to know.
Yeah, they regard me well and we have a great relationship, but I think that's not about my shenanigans, that's about my honesty. They know that I will always be honest with them, and so when they come to me with issues around sex or drugs or navigating all this stuff, I will give them my absolute honest opinion. I will share with them my own experiences, and they are safe. And they've even had friends who they've told that to, and it hasn't needed to happen, but they've had friends who they've said, for example, with experimenting with drugs, if something happens and your parents are not going to be well equipped to support you, my mum is cool.
You also, I imagine, would have enhanced value as an advice giver to kids who are having problems or issues, especially with girls or with relationships. You've been through the wars, so do you think that you are actually in a better position to offer good advice?
I do, and I think that my kids were there when the marriage separated, and they were with me for a long time before they were they were doing the going between two homes, and certainly the older one, I think, knows that I have a big phoenix tattoo here. I rose from the ashes.
COVID. How has COVID messed with you?
Well, COVID's messed with me much like it messed with everybody, but one of the differences for me was that I didn't let it stop me. So I did lots of online work. I created content which I hadn't done before, and I did sketch, which was sort of how some of this doing the voices and reacting to them came about, because I did some sketches online where I was different versions of myself. And I hosted some online shows. Tash did some online shows, and I was on one of those. So I think a lot of people kind of went, oh no, I can't perform anymore. I'm going to stay home and get depressed. And we all got depressed, but I did. I kept creating.
Did you have a show that was cancelled?
Oh, did I? Yeah, I had shows that were cancelled and then rescheduled and then cancelled again, and then this was supposed to be on last year and it was cancelled, and yeah. Oh yeah.
Is that true? This was meant to be on last year?
This was meant to be on last year.
Okay.
But it was. It's changed a lot. It wasn't.
What's the other show that was cancelled?
Unbridled was cancelled twice, but we put it on last year and then we put it on again for Comedy Festival this year. And then I had, I run regular queer comedy variety nights. They were cancelled and rescheduled and cancelled, and I did them online. And there were some nights where we'd get maybe 6 people tuning in, and we did a profit share. So some nights, you know, it was like, we all get $9. But a couple of nights it was like, we all get $110. It was like from, you know, being in our house with our Kmart ring lights.
Can you tell me about Tash?
Tash is a dream, and I'm kicking myself when I was doing the thank yous at the end that I didn't thank her. It's written in my script that I'm thanking her. I just was a bit dazzled and confused. I met Tash, I was running a comedy room, I think is when we met, and I'd heard of her, and I think I'd seen, not necessarily one of her full-length shows, but I'd seen her perform, and I thought she was amazing. And then I was running a room, and she had a show coming up, and I said, do you want to come and do a spot and promote your show? And she did, and I was like, oh my god, she knows who I am. And then we became friends, and then I said, like, can you be my mentor? Can we have an official, you know, and I'll pay you for hours you spend when we're officially, you're being my mentor. And yeah, as she said, she's been with me with this show, and it was just an idea, and the original name of the original idea was The Best Is Yet to Come, and it was going to be about being this age, which was like 2019, so being this age and going, I'm getting better, I'm knowing myself more, and I'm getting better as I age. And then it became the show that you saw tonight, and The Best Is Yet to Come, maybe another show later on.
Tash York, you are a prominent cabaret performer.
I am.
Okay,
I do cabaret, I MC, I sing, I do mentoring and directing and all sorts of stuff.
How long have you been doing this for?
Doing this sort of stuff since 2014.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what is your part in this Lucy Best show, Disgraceful?
We do a lot of mentoring and story crafting and discussing the ideas behind what being disgraceful is and how to tie it all together with all of the stories that she already had. Basically, I helped be a bit of a lyrebird, and she kind of gave me all the bits and pieces, and we together kind of figured out how to make it have a structure and have a moment.
It's a very well structured show, and it's a very well thought out narrative. It's not messy like some biographically based live shows are.
Absolutely.
It's actually got a very solid structure. There are themes running through it.
Yes.
And this is partly due to your contribution, and this is something you're imposing that discipline on her.
Something I'm very passionate about is that everyone has stories to tell, but there needs to be a structure and almost like a coat hanger that everything needs to kind of go off underneath, and so that all of these things can happen, but at the end they all need to answer one question. And so for this show it was, why is Lucy disgraceful and what does that mean? And basically every story fed into that question every single time, so that at the end it was all drawn together like a purse string, and then you're like, great, this is why, this is what's happening. And she definitely achieved that. She had all of the stories and all of the moments there. It was just about kind of helping her realize what order they need to go in and how it makes it answer an overall message.
Is this the first time she's performed this show?
Very first time she's performed, very first solo show from Lucy as well, so she's done amazing.
Do you have any notes for her?
Nothing major. I came in this afternoon and did some notes with her, and she did all of the notes that I said this afternoon, so she's a very good student. I think there's a lot of stuff that just comes with doing the show over and over again that she'll get to learn, and maybe a few asides and whatnot that she could like really tease out, but the bones and everything's there. It's just about growing the extra hair and figuring out how it all fits into the suit.
Just really quickly, are you allowed to share maybe what 2 of those notes were?
One of them would be to maybe put it out to the audience a bit more about whether they can relate as to how disgraceful they were. To kind of go, I did this, what about you? And just have that kind of back and forth so that the audience feels like they can be disgraceful, because I think that's the point of the show, is to celebrate disgracefulness in all its forms. And the other one is for her to have a microphone at the end when she's singing that song so she can sing the fuck out of it and everyone can have a great time. But yeah.